When you speak?
Can you hear me?
Oh, fuck, dude. He's on Charlie.
I don't know. Just roll with Adam.
Yeah.
All right, roll with Adam.
Yeah, let's go.
All right. All right, you are listening to or maybe watching the live stream of the Fantasy Bros Week 14 breakdown. We've got myself, Bobby Gomez, and big fat winner John Kelly. John, I think you deserve the intro here. Tell us a little bit about the past week.
Oh yeah, man. I mean, I had a good week. Thanksgiving slate. Was fortunate enough to take second in the big $33 contest. Actually, I was the favorite for first. I'm not gonna tilt it, but Jared Cook not catching a single ball in the second half cost me 10K. So that was a bit of a sweat. But all in all, very thankful. Good slate. Ready to get on to the next week.
Nice hit. Yeah, I saw that. I threw the like on Twitter. It was nice to see that. Um, nice Thanksgiving Day takedown. I like that. Yeah, just looking forward. What are we talking? Week 14. The season's going by fast. It feels like, guys.
Yeah, we are talking Week 14. We are talking the first game of Week 14 that I have: Green Bay versus Washington. Green Bay 13-point home favorite versus Washington, a 41.5 point total. For me, when the implied team total of Washington is below 15, it's hard to even get excited about a run back. But on the opposite side of things, Green Bay with one of the higher implied team totals just over 27. I guess my question would be more of a broad one of how do you even attack a game like this, John, where one team is expected to score so little, but like you're trying to correlate your lineups as much as possible.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's like the main thing here is Devontae Adams. I really would like to, with such a high team total, like you said, I would like to look at more pieces, but between the Aaron Jones debacle and Jamal Williams, like, you just can't trust either one of them really. And then Alan Lazard has been getting more snaps than MVS now, but not a ton of targets. So it really is just all Devontae Adams coming off a big week. It's another good matchup. The only problem is he's priced up at 8K, but he's really the only guy. Not a ton of interest in this game overall. Bob, did I miss anyone?
No, you pretty much hit the nail on the head on the Washington side. Very low implied team total. Don't really want to run it back there, but Darius Geis had the 2 touchdowns last week. And then Terry McLaurin's been high in the air yards model. He's at 5,100. Don't mind those guys, but I feel like I probably wouldn't have much interest because of what their implied team total is. And yes, it would be Devontae Adams for me as well. Kyle, any last thoughts?
Yeah, I would just say for the people looking to Darius Geis, that's pretty, in my opinion, point chasing. We saw he still completely split rushing work with Adrian Peterson last week. He played on less than a third of the team snaps, and Chris Thompson is healthy. If I were looking for a run back, I would be much more inclined to go Terry McLaurin, who I just think even on a bad offense, when you're getting 4 to 5 deep shots a game, you can hit one of those. Whereas if you're Darius Geis running on an awful offense and you're only getting 10 carries, like, it's not very appealing to me. You have to project him to get a larger, by a lot, market share of his team's carries, and I just don't think that's reasonable with how well Adrian Peterson has played, and two, how they've used him all season. So that's pretty much all I have for this game. Much more exciting. Next game we have is the Bucks versus Indy. Bucks are at home as 3-point favorites. The total has dropped significantly, 3 points to 46.5, but it's still on a kind of a slower slate. One of the better totals. Bobby, how are you going with the Bucks here? We've got Peyton Barber took over basically as the starter. Ronald Jones missed a pass block or like a blitz pickup early in the game, was just completely benched. And we joked about it on the Die Hard show earlier, but like Bruce Arians, so incredibly vindictive, completely benching Ronald Jones, who's played well this year, completely benched O.J. Howard for a bunch of mistakes that he probably deserved to be benched for, but just like outright benched him. And the most mistake-prone quarterback in the league, Jameis Winston, you just got to keep firing that guy up. I honestly think he's a better quarterback than you do, but it is just incredible how he just he rips into Ronald Jones, doesn't play O.J. Howard, but just keep firing up Jameis.
Yeah, he just keeps throwing Jameis back out there. and it's crazy. He's terrible real life quarterback, but he works for fantasy, so we can roll with it. I don't know if I'm on him at 6,400. I feel like this is a game that you're going to want to have interest in, especially because Jack Doyle is going to see a good percentage of targets on the other side. It could be pretty chalky. So if you wanted to run it back, you'd want to have maybe a Mike Evans or a Godwin stack, or just like a total game stack with Jameis, Evans, Godwin, and running it back with Doyle, or Marlon Mack could play as well. That's another guy you'd have to consider. I think my favorite guy on the Tampa Bay side would be Godwin. I don't want to steal your thunder here, but Godwin and the Bucks D, I think they correlate a little in this situation. Although I don't want to really, I don't love this game. Like I feel like I'm just kind of forcing stuff when I'm talking about it. So, John, any thoughts here on maybe you can give us some clarity in terms of like this game in general?
No, I'm really in the same boat as you. Unfortunately, can't give you much more clarity, but I do love the defense call at 2,300. I think they are at home, Tampa Bay, and the last couple weeks they've been getting a ton of pressure on opposing quarterbacks. I think they have, without looking, I think 5 and 6 the last 2 weeks sacks, and a couple turnovers. So I do like that against Indianapolis, but that's really the only other thing that I wanted to highlight.
Yeah, I would say on the Indy side, they are looking like they're getting Paris Campbell back, and they will be almost certainly without T.Y. Hilton and definitely without Chester Rogers. So he'll fill in as their second receiver on a team that's going to be passing a lot. He's a pretty good athlete. He was getting a lot of work earlier in the season before he got hurt for like a game or two. He's basically coming on and got hurt at the worst possible time. So a guy at 3,200, like basically min price, I'd be pretty interested in. But that's like a price specific play. I'm not awfully interested in him in this situation. It's not the best game. Their offense hasn't been awfully good without T.Y. Hilton, but for the volume you can project him to get at 3,200, assuming he does play, which he's a full participant in practice, so I expect him to come back this week. I think it's a fine play, but outside of that, I'm kind of in the same boat as you guys with this game. Let's see. The next game I have here, a much more interesting one. We have the Saints versus the 49ers. Saints are 2.5 point favorites in the Superdome. Totals at 44.5 has come down a point. The Saints are as cheap as you're pretty much ever going to get them. Michael Thomas, 83. Alvin Kamara, 6 on the dot. What are you doing? I guess for me, normally, I'm not looking to stack the Saints just because it costs so much to roster, basically to roster Breeze, Thomas, Kamara, that for specifically Thomas and Kamara to pay off, they have to hit like 50 points as a team, like 50 points as a team. Now they're so cheap that that's not necessarily the case. What are you doing in this spot with the Saints, Bobby?
Yeah, so for me, like I think that you could game stack the Saints, add just because of the ownership, Michael Thomas, Kamara, and then go Breeze. I think you go Jared Cook, and then run it back with one of these San Francisco 49ers, whether it be Tevin Coleman, who lost out to Raheem Mostert, but on the fast track now in the Superdome, which we all know is the Coors Field of the NFL. So I don't. I really like when a team like San Francisco is going to be low owned in the Superdome. Caught it 2 weeks ago with the Panthers. The usage isn't as concentrated with San Francisco. That's pretty much the issue. What I should have said was I like getting opposing teams with positive game spread in the Superdome at low ownership. I think Kittle's fine at 5,900. Garoppolo at 56. I think he's interesting as well. Emmanuel Sanders, 5,800, low ownership, tight game. I really like Emmanuel Sanders in this script like this, and Debo at 56. I think I'd probably prefer Sanders, but Debo makes sense, especially on the fast track as well. John, where are you going?
Yeah, I like a lot of the guys that you hit on there. This is really, nobody stands out as like a core play or a cash game play for me in this game. They're all pretty much just tournament plays. But I do think at some point, Alvin Kamara has to find the end zone, right? Like he's like one of the biggest candidates for some positive touchdown regression. So I think in tournaments, it's perceived a bad matchup. Maybe we can get him low owned and hope that the touchdown regression hits. So and then Debo Samuel was the other guy that you hit on. Dude's just been producing every single week over the last like 3 or 4 weeks. Good matchup against the Saints. He doesn't get a ton of volume, but he's been really efficient with that volume. So I don't hate him as a play in like the mid range.
Yeah, I like the Debo call. Like I gotta look into this side more. Kamara looks like he could be chalk at 7K. Is that a bad take? I feel like he might be pretty chalky situationally here for the price.
No, I mean I would be surprised if he's not one of the higher owned backs on the slate. One because he's so cheap, but two like he's had a pretty solid floor since coming back. He just hasn't had the ceiling game, and I think like DFS players have gotten smart enough to the point where like we're cognizant of the fact that he's averaging 9 point something targets since returning. Like John said, he is just legitimately a good play for the volume he's getting, and the touchdown regression will hit at some point, and he's just so cheap. So I think he'll be a more popular back on the slate, but I guess that's something we can look to going forward in the week. If he's not, then I'll just be all over him.
Yeah, I think he's going to be pretty chalky at 7K. I could be wrong, though. What's the next game up?
Next game we have is Atlanta versus Carolina. Atlanta are 3 point home favorites. It's a 47 point total, tied for like the second highest total on the slate with maybe one other game. I think for this game we're finally getting like DJ Moore's priced up, but he's a straight baller, so is the price even that bad? Curtis Samuel getting all the air yards, but not really converting much on it. And obviously Christian McCaffrey just to go. Where are you going on the Panther side to start off with, John?
Yeah, pretty much all those guys. And I'm pretty sure Samuel did catch a touchdown last week, didn't he? Or did he not?
Yeah, he definitely had a TD last week.
Okay. I just wanted to check. You know, as a Curtis Samuel truther, I wanted to point that out. But no, I like you said, DJ Moore always good. He's priced up. Christian McCaffrey gonna be the lock and load play, even coming off the letdown spot. You know, going back to the running back conversation, like we were talking about, if everybody's gonna play CMC, Kamara, and probably Patrick Laird, then you know those are probably like the three main running backs people are gonna play. Then when we get to these other games like Leonard Fournette, Lev Bell, you know, I'm definitely curious on those guys when we get there. But CMC obviously a great play. And then on the flip side, Atlanta, I think Julio Jones will be low owned coming off the shoulder injury. He's supposed to play. They get Austin Hooper back. I like this game quite a bit on a slate where there's not a ton of games that I like. This is one that I definitely want a lot of pieces in.
Yeah, CMC, like, you can't go wrong. I think Kyle Allen's a good way to kind of differentiate this Carolina offense, especially in Atlanta. It's in a dome on the fast track. Once again, similar situation, positive. He just correlates so well with McCaffrey, even though they are favorites. I just like, they're not favorites, actually. Atlanta's favorited by 3. Yeah, I like Kyle Allen with McCaffrey because I think that'll be something that it'll kind of give you the differentiation. Like if you used Geis last week with McCaffrey, I feel like you're just trying to differentiate off how highly owned McCaffrey's going to be. I think Kyle Allen's a way to do that. Thomas is going to be chalk at 2,500. I think he's fine. On the Atlanta side, I just can't figure out like what I want to do. Kyle, do you have any ideas in terms of Atlanta?
Yeah, for me, we've basically seen Julio's role completely cut down as opposed to like years past. And in my mind, like the only thing that changed significantly from last year was the Austin Hooper breakout. I am fine with rolling back to Austin Hooper. He is 6K, so I'd probably only be doing that in like the scenario where I thought this game hits like a massive over, so in a game stack. But I do think, like you said, a good way to leverage what I would assume would be pretty chalky Ian Thomas. He was averaging like 12 or so fantasy points over the last 5 games of last season. He started to get hot when Greg Olsen wasn't playing. Greg Olsen hasn't practiced this week, hasn't cleared concussion protocol. I don't think he'll be playing. So yeah, to leverage like the Christian McCaffrey weekly chalk and the Ian Thomas chalk, maybe stacking them with Kyle Allen or going to like a DJ Moore, running it back with Austin Hooper. Probably also not going to Calvin Ridley because he's kind of in the same boat that Julio Jones is. Austin Hooper has been eating into his work as well. Basically, until Austin Hooper got hurt, he was like close to irrelevant outside of 1 or 2 games. So I think Austin Hooper's probably the best play. Maybe also Devonta Freeman. But outside of that, I think I would much rather just look to the Carolina side and run like a one-off back from Atlanta.
Hooper seems like a really good play if he's healthy and we get the word that he's a full go, especially way to run this back. Just looking at it. What do we have up next?
The next game I am looking at here is Minnesota versus Detroit. Minnesota are 13-point favorites against the David Blau-led Lions. 43.5-point total. We did see Blau have a really good game last on Thanksgiving, especially for both his price and the expectation coming in as third stringer on a short week. So I think you're fine playing, especially TJ Hawkinson on IR also. So that's a little bit of volume available as well. I think you're fine playing your Galladay and your Marvin Jones. I probably wouldn't be playing both, but I think either of them is fine. Minnesota, so Dalvin Cook says he thinks he's fine. He's expected to play, and I think it was like Chow or one of the many DFS doctors said that it's mostly a pain tolerance issue. But we have seen in many weeks in the past where Adam Thielen really thought he was going to play, and he hasn't played in weeks. Players aren't the most realistic to project themselves to play. If he doesn't play, Alexander Mattison just mega chalk. And I think it's very much warranted, especially with Adam Thielen also. I don't know if he suffered a setback or if they're just coming to a more realistic projection of when he's going to play, but it doesn't look like he's playing this week. So I think Stephon Diggs coming off a letdown spot is probably a real sneaky play against just a bad Lions defense in general, but they're also allowing the largest depth of targets. So if Stephon Diggs can get a few deep balls, he just annihilate this defense. So actually, the more I talk about it, I think Stephon Diggs is a very solid play. Where are you looking at in this game, assuming Dalvin Cook plays, but with the contingency that just Alexander Mattison is good chalk if he does get the start? Bobby, go ahead.
Yeah, so you hit on Diggs. I think Olabisi Johnson would be another guy who's going to see wide receiver 2 usage. Kind of busted his chalk on an island game the other night. He would be interesting. If Dalvin Cook doesn't play, you hit the nail on the head with Mattinson, automatic free square at that point. On the Detroit side, I would be more apt, and I think you probably hit on this, to run back Detroit than a team like Washington versus Green Bay. Like David Blau, the sample size just isn't really there, so this implied team total might not be high enough. It could be pretty accurate, but it might not be, so we can take our chances maybe throwing a stack together with Blau, Marvin Jones, Kenny Galladay, and running it back with one of these Minnesota guys. Minnesota's pretty high implied team total, so I think it makes sense. Obviously, the guy would probably be Mattison if Cook sat. John, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think you guys covered it pretty well. Going back to the Joe Blow or Jeff Blow, whatever his name is.
The massive disrespect.
Yeah. So he's obviously not a good quarterback. He had some egregious throws last game, but the thing that is positive that the Lions have going for them is he's not afraid to take some shots. We saw him take some shots deep down the field to Jones and Galladay. So that's why I like that you brought that up, Kyle, because I think obviously a low implied team total, sure, but he's going to take shots to them, and Minnesota has sneakily been one of the worst teams against opposing wide receivers this season. So I think you're going to get him at low ownership, and at least in theory, they could be in store for a big day. And then on the other side, you guys broke it down pretty much perfectly. If Dalvin Cook doesn't play, Mattison, 100% lock and load. If he does play, then I think he's an interesting tournament play that's probably going to be 2% owned because, like we said, we already mentioned the other running backs that everybody's going to play. And then on top of that, people worried about this whole pain tolerance issue. If he plays, maybe not in higher stuff, but at least in something smaller, maybe mid-stakes, I want to get at least one share of Dalvin Cook if he's active in this game.
Yeah, I like that. We can get into our next game. We have the Texans as 9.5-point favorites versus Denver. Texans at home, 41.5-point total. The Texans' prices are all pretty cheap. Watson, I think, is 65. Stills is 37 or something crazy. Don't pay a ton. You don't have to pay top-tier pricing. Let's see. Hopkins is 6, behind guys like Julio Jones and Stephon Diggs. So with the Texans being so cheap but the run back options being difficult, are you looking at stacking this game at all, John, or is it just running one-offs? Or if at all,
Yeah, a little bit of both. I've kind of been waiting for the Phillip Lindsay game. I know it's been bad, looking at his box scores. and Denver always has a really low implied team total. But since he's been named the starter, I like to always say I'm chasing the volume, and he's been getting the volume. It's just the efficiency hasn't been great, and there's been 0 touchdowns. So at some point, he had like 17 carries on Sunday, had like 16 a couple weeks ago, and he's getting a couple targets as well. So and in none of those games he scored double-digit DraftKings points. So at some point that's going to change. He's a guy in the past that we've seen a high ceiling from. So I actually like Philip Lindsay as a tournament play. He's cheap enough. And then on the Texans side, Will Fuller is questionable. You mentioned how cheap Kenny Stills in. If Fuller for some reason can't go, which wouldn't shock us at all because he always is dealing with some sort of hamstring issue. Kenny Stills would just be like way too cheap to the point where you'd probably have to play him in cash.
Yeah, I like that Colin Stills. That price tag is just egregious, especially if Fuller sits. Watson, Hopkins for me on the Denver side. Like I don't pretty bad. Like maybe Cortland Sutton. That'd be pretty much it. Like I don't really love the Denver side. Lindsay at 5,300. The price is good, but not too much there. Kyle, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I want to. This is obviously a Noah Fant sponsored podcast, but last week he was out targeted. he was out targeted by Jeff Hireman. I think as a massive underdog, it's still interesting to go back to an athletic tight end who's running particularly deep routes for a tight end. But I probably just am not playing enough lineups to get any Noah Fant this week, with the concern that like they're running more Hireman out there.
Yeah, I think you get maybe the hatchet with Noah Fant at this point.
All right, our next game, a middling total, but one of my favorite games to watch on the slate. We have Buffalo at home as 5.5-point dogs versus Baltimore. Two of the most entertaining quarterbacks to watch, and then Lamar Jackson, literally the best quarterback fantasy has ever seen if he can keep up this pace. 7,400, the most expensive quarterback on the slate, but I find interesting. I'm pretty sure he is actually on pace to have the most fantasy points for a quarterback ever. And we're seeing Christian McCaffrey, I think at 10.5 was like the second or third most a DraftKings running back ever been priced. Michael Thomas at 99. I know for sure it was the second most a wide receiver had ever been priced. We're not seeing like insane prices on Lamar Jackson. For me, I'm just continuing to fire him up in cash because he's a lock for nearly 30 points at 7,400. It's kind of like Christian McCaffrey. It's just like I'll find ways to get these guys in. I get that like last week, Carson Wentz was actually very like owned option in cash. He's a very good option. But I'd rather bet on getting my Lamar Jackson RB1 numbers than like whiff on trying to call a lesser quarterback in what we'll call a better matchup. So where are you going? I guess, Bobby, where are you going with Lamar Jackson?
Yeah, so I think Lamar Jackson obviously is someone you want to have exposure to. In this game, though, I feel like his ceiling's capped with just how much both him and Josh Allen are going to run. I feel like he's in play for cash, but I might rather go to a guy like Deshaun Watson. If I am using Lamar Jackson, I'd correlate him with the Ravens D. I think that's a way to kind of be different. Usually most people are correlating the running back with the defense, but I think you can do that with Jackson. Over the sample size that we've seen this year, it kind of works. You kind of went over that last podcast. Mark Ingram's another guy versus run funnel defense that I don't mind correlating with the Ravens D as well, or just kind of having exposure to an MME. And on the Buffalo side, little revenge narrative for John Brown. You're one of those guys. Maybe you game stack Jackson and Brown or Ingram and Brown. I'm probably not going to go there, but maybe some people would be interested in that. John, any thoughts around this game?
Yeah, I mean, I'm with Kyle and you, Bob. I think Lamar Jackson's the best QB on the slate, especially in cash. I think he's actually a must-play in cash, just for the high floor. I mean, 60 or more rushing yards in 9 straight games. You just can't find that floor, at any price. And at least last week there were other options to where you can, there were cheaper options like Carson Wentz or Andy Dalton. This week, there is really no other QB option like cheap or really anywhere that I feel comfortable with in cash games. So I'm going to be playing him for sure. Love the Mark Ingram call. He's cheap at 5,900. Didn't score last week, so he'll probably be low owned. And I just love attacking Buffalo with the running backs. I think you could stack Lamar and Mark Ingram as well. So
Yeah, that's an injury. That stack has kind of worked, even though you'd think it wouldn't work. It's worked a couple times this year, and I don't hate that call. I'm just worried about the ceiling being capped with just how much running is going to be done in this game. So for both of these quarterbacks, I might even prefer like I was just running a couple optimals, and I keep seeing like Watson, Tannehill. I haven't got any Lamar Jackson yet. Obviously, that's going to change by Sunday, but um, I don't know. For right now, like I don't know if I really. He's like definitely my guy in cash games. It makes me a little nervous to say that. I think even Darnold is someone I'd consider. Um, so I don't know. Anyone have any thoughts on that?
I mean, I can't trust Darnold. I mean, I get
I'm
it.
not
If he's
playing.
playing
I'm not
Miami,
like
he's
I
at
don't
home,
know.
and quarterbacks against Miami have crushed all year. But it's like, man, I'd feel really really nervous. I totally get it. I don't think I could pull the trigger.
Yeah, I think if he's I don't know. He seems like someone who's popping. So
I believe
I don't
it.
know. I'd definitely rather go Lamar Jackson over Darnold though. But
Yeah, I
I
mean,
feel
I'll be going Lamar Jackson for the stupid floor, and like even if the rushing kind of caps his upside, still one of the higher upside players on the slate. I get why like Darnold in like projection wise is probably dollar for dollar better play, but man, like the floor on any quarterback not named Lamar Jackson is just the disparity between the two is incredible. But yeah, I get the idea behind it. So as we talk about Sam Darnold, let's talk about his game. Jets are at home, 5 point favorites versus Miami. A 45 point total has come up a point and a half. What do you like so much about Sam Darnold, Bobby? I get that you're just saying it's in like you're not locking him in yet, but he is legitimately a good play this week in my opinion.
yeah, point per dollar wise, he's a good play. I'm not locking him in yet, but I feel like a lot of chalk's going to come from this game just from kind of doing some, just from looking at like some prices like Crowder 5,300. We obviously have been targeting quarterbacks versus Miami. All these Jets are kind of cheap. Uh, New York has a 26 implied team total. Lev at 7,200 there. Crowder would definitely be the guy that sticks out. Um, and then on the Miami side, Devontae Parker, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Patrick Laird for that like I could see I could just see a build like in my head if we don't get the Mattinson news that we want, like Laird being chalk and then a game stack of Darnold and Crowder kind of making up the first cash game. I know everyone's talking about like Duke's lineups and stuff on Twitter, but it would be kind of I feel like that would probably be a pretty popular build to kind of start in cash. Maybe I'm wrong about that. We'll see on Sunday.
John, what do you? I guess like for me, the Miami options are pretty clear. Like if you're running Darnold stack, the run back is Patrick Laird, Devontae Parker, or Mike Gesicki. What are you doing? I guess we'll start with Devontae Parker because now up to I believe 6,900, but the dude is like legit balling right now, getting a ton of volume too on a team that's just so depleted of any like really any other receivers on the team. So are you willing to pay up to now his very new and expensive price?
I am in tournaments. Not a cash game guy for me. If talking cash games, I think Patrick Laird and Mike Gesicki are the guys. If we don't get the Greg Olson ruled out, which I think we will, and we'll play Ian Thomas, but if we don't, Mike Gesicki's the guy at only 4K. He's second among tight ends in air yards since week 9, fourth in targets in that span, like only behind Travis Kelsey in air yards. So he's just a total beast, man. Running like deep routes, like we were talking about with Noah Fant. Basically, I love him at that price, and then Patrick Laird just going to see the passing game volume. I think he's going to be chalky, but I'm okay with eating it in cash games. And then I'll pick my spots with Devontae, but certainly another good spot for him here against the Jets. And on the flip side, I think Lev Bell's in a good spot. I think Robbie Anderson has finally come alive. You know, there's definitely pieces in this game with a rising total on both sides where this could be pretty interesting here. Jets, Dolphins, just load them up.
All right, I like it. Let's hop into our next game with the opposite of a rising total. One of the larger falling totals. We have Cleveland versus the Bengals. Cleveland are at home, 8.5 point favorites. A 40.5 point total that has dropped 2 points since opening. I mean, maybe a reaction to some of the Baker news. He's supposed to play, but he is dealing with, I think it's a rib or a knee injury, and then obviously the hand injury that sidelined him at the very end of the first half for a few snaps. Is expected to play. There's not really any indication that anything otherwise. But yeah, this team faces the Bengals, one of the worst pass defenses in the league. They've got both of their receivers are relatively reasonably priced. Odell, I think, at 63, and Jarvis finally priced over him after outperforming him basically all season. Where are you going with this game? Is there any interest in running it back with a Bengal, given that their team total is at 16, Bobby?
Yeah, not much interest with running it back with a Bengal, but Joe Mixon's price of 5,800 on hate, Tyler Boyd 5,900 on hate. Just not really interested in really running this game back. I don't mind the Mayfield Odell stack if you're trying to hit something in tournaments, like if you're building a group for whatever reason. Just with how down people are, you can kind of leverage that recency bias. The play that I really like on the Cleveland side is Nick Chubb at 8K. I know Kareem Hunt has kind of cut into his workload, but he's a guy that can break a 75-yard run at any point, kind of in the same mold of Derrick Henry. And versus the Cincinnati team, I think that he's a really good play. And as sort of leverage off if Beckham becomes chalky, which kind of been looking at some builds, and I think he probably will be. Um, was kind of hoping he wasn't going to be, but yeah. So that would pretty much be kind of how I'd attack this game. How about you, John?
Yeah, I love the Nick Chubb call. You know, you mentioned people aren't playing him as much because of Kareem Hunt. I played him last week or the week before, and he was only like 8% owned, but he's still getting like 20 carries. So like the volume's still there. But I like Odell, Odust Beckham, Odell Beckham, whatever you want to call him. I think against Cincinnati, he's cheap enough. I get it. I do think the Bengals are an interesting cover bet here. I wrote them up at the fantasypros.com. Bengals plus 8.5 divisional game, only a 40.5 over under. I think that's a pretty strong play, but overall, more interest on the bet than I do from a DFS angle.
Yeah, I think you guys covered that pretty well, and I agree with you. I think Odell's probably going to be chalky because every week just seems to be Odell Beckham week, despite Jarvis Landry being better almost the entire season. But to leverage that, I think the interesting play would be Nick Chubb, especially with the positive game script. Like Kareem Hunt, obviously eating into the receiving game work. It's been a pretty dynamic receiver since joining the team. But as 8.5 point favorites, I don't expect that to be a huge factor. It's kind of Derrick Henry-esque, in my opinion, getting just planning on the large home favorite for running back with like really dynamic playmaking ability, getting a decent amount of carries. I think that's a great way to attack this game.
Yeah, I think the Chubb call could be like a slate breaker come the end of Sunday. I feel like just because he's going to be well owned and it's just a really good spot.
All right, let's hop into our next game. We have Jacksonville versus the Chargers. Jacksonville 3 point underdogs at home. Minshew will be starting under center. A 43 point total for this slate is probably right about the middle. Lots of players getting volume in this game. The Chargers have been throwing a lot and just spreading it out in general between Mike Williams, Hunter Henry, and Keenan Allen. And on the converse side, we have Jacksonville. Of course, Leonard Fournette's been getting his in terms of volume, not scoring touchdowns. But they've gotten the past week, D.D. Westbrook, Chris Conley, and DJ Chark have all gotten decent amounts of volume. Last week it was a D.D. week. The weeks before that, they were kind of, the two other receivers were kind of crushing them in terms of targets and air yards. So where are you going on a game that's so spread out, but I think is not completely uninteresting? Both of these defenses have struggled at points, especially Jacksonville as of recently. Where are you going with this game, Bobby?
Yeah, Hunter Henry's like the guy that keeps popping up in optimals. He would be my first target. Melvin Gordon on the other side. He's 17 and 20 carries last two games, 6,400. I think that price is pretty good. Versus a run funnel defense like Jacksonville. On the Jacksonville side, it's just tough, right? Like the Chargers have been pretty good versus the pass. They got a lot of guys back. Actually, they haven't been great on defense, but I feel like with the guys they're getting back, they'll be better. They're coming across country too. I would like Minshew and Chark. I feel like that's interesting, but that's pretty much it. John, any thoughts?
No, I mean, I'm with you both. The only thing worth mentioning is all three of the Jags wide receivers, Chris Conley, D.D. Westbrook, and DJ Chark, were all limited today in practice. They're all currently listed as questionable. It doesn't seem like anything's that serious. D.D. Westbrook was actually out for personal reasons. So I don't know. It's just something worth monitoring because if any one of those three were ruled out, then I would definitely be super excited to play the other two. But overall, just not a ton of interest here.
Yeah, good call on that. I just very much second that. If we knew that the passing game volume for Jacksonville, who's been, I think they've attempted. I know at least before last week they had like 4 straight games of over 40 pass attempts because they keep losing football games. Like if we got that sort of volume concentrated, just even 2 of these guys would be very interesting. So I like monitoring that going forward. For me, Hunter Henry probably the best play on the opposite side, and the optimal seem to agree with that. Since returning in week 7, he's third in targets and first in air yards because, like some of the other like young athletic tight ends, when you get these guys getting a lot of routes, typically they're running like these athletic guys are running deeper routes. So we've got Hunter Henry with more air yards than Travis Kelce, than like Zach Ertz or George Kittle, I guess, in his time. More air yards than any of those guys since he returned, and he just hasn't had like a crazy ceiling game. He's been just shy of the 100-yard bonus. He's had games where he scored but didn't have a ton of receptions. So I think he's a very solid play. I don't know if he's going to be popular. I guess it's not the best in tournaments, but you could run him back with some Jacksonville, maybe a Jacksonville receiver, or in my opinion, Fournette. But yeah, I think that's all we have for this game. Let's hop into, we have Arizona at home, 2.5-point dogs to Pittsburgh, 43.5-point total. So for this game, I think we should probably lead off with the Arizona running back situation. David Johnson just completely dust. I think he got 6 opportunities last week. It was like 4 carries, 2 targets, but all but one of those came in the second half. It just seems like they have no interest in getting him involved unless they're down 20. Kenyon Drake, on the other hand, got I want to say it was 17 or 18 opportunities, combined carries and targets. I think he's a very solid play this week. Pittsburgh defense is good, but volume is better, and especially in a backfield as a whole that's really produced a ton of yardage. I think Kenyon Drake's a very solid play. Christian Kirk, always in play after a few slow weeks, I think will probably come at decent ownership. Bobby, where would you look to run it back on the Pittsburgh side, and is there anywhere else you'd even consider going on Arizona?
Yeah, you kind of named the 2 guys on Arizona. It's Christian Kirk and Kenyon Drake for me. On the Pittsburgh side, like Deontay Johnson's popping in models. He's questionable right now, though. At 4,300, he would make sense versus Arizona pass defense. Vance McDonald, 4,300, hasn't been great. Got a rookie QB back there now and this is a situation where we've streamed tight ends versus Arizona. It's pretty much been the narrative all year with this team. So maybe if you want to differentiate that, I just don't really love this game too much. I feel like I should though, right? Arizona plays paced up. I don't know. There's not much I love in this game. John, how about you?
No, I'm with you, man. I think it could be an ugly game. Kenyon Drake is really the only play I like on either side, just because, like Kyle said, he's cheap and he is their guy. He only saw 13 carries, but that's because they were getting blown out. Prior to the blowout, he literally played every snap at running back. So I think the snaps and the touches would have looked a lot different between the split if Arizona was actually close in that game. So Kenyon Drake is for sure underpriced, and Pittsburgh's been tougher than people realize against wide receivers. So I'm actually not on Christian Kirk or Tyler Murray in this matchup.
All right, let's hop into our next game. We have interesting game here. Ryan Tannehill facing Oakland. Oakland at home, 3-point dogs, a 47-point total. One of the only games at or above 47. Has come up half a point since opening. So for me, I mean, Tannehill has been legitimately a good quarterback. He's thrown some interceptions and he's taken a crazy amount of sacks. He's actually second in the league in sack percentage. But he's still been balling out in terms of fantasy. I think since he took over the starting role, he's like a top 5 quarterback in terms of fantasy points. So he's been getting it done both on the ground and sometimes through the air. So what do you make of this Tennessee offense, John?
Yeah, I mean, Tannehill's been not bad. He's been serviceable. It always helps when when you can actually run. And he used to be a wide receiver, so he's actually athletic, so it makes sense. Um, I don't know if you guys know, but in the months of November and December, you just have to play Derrick Henry. So obviously, Derrick Henry's been crushing. Seen a ton of volume. I know they're on the road, but they're a favorite. Should be good game flow for him. The only problem is he's really priced up, but I think nobody's going to play him, or at least a small percentage. So he could be low owned here in a good matchup against Oakland. So he's really the guy that I'm keying in on the Tennessee side. But what do you like on the Oakland side, Bobby, if anything?
Yeah, so the Tannehill's interesting. Like maybe pairing Tannehill with Tannehill might be pretty chalky. Like I'm looking at a couple different things, and Tannehill might be a better play than Darnold if these projection systems are as accurate as like how he's popping. So basically, I don't mean to sound like Justin. Sorry. Tyrell Williams on the other side of 5K. I don't mind him. Darren Waller, 5,800. Don't hate him. Actually, I don't like him. Like 5,800. Honestly, like it'd probably be Tyrell Williams. And on the Tennessee side, I like AJ Brown. I think he's interesting at 5,300 for tournament. Henry and Tannehill. That'd pretty much be it. Kyle, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I was looking at, and if you're watching on stream, you'll see this Derek Carr priced lower than Marcus Mariota, who is not going to be playing in this game at 5K. But Carr, Carr legitimately, he has 2 games over 20 and no games over 25. It's just he's not that good. His offense isn't very conducive to fantasy points for really much of their passing game. It's been a lot through Josh Jacobs. Yeah, I thought it was interesting at first, but I think maybe just the play is like if you're running Tannehill, run it back with Jacobs and hope he can catch a ball or two. Because he's even in games where they're down, still got man, they don't mind going for the establish it. So decent chance at the 100-yard bonus. He's gotten in multiple games this year. Not my favorite play in negative game script for a guy who doesn't get very much receiving game work, but I think if you're running Tannehill stacks, maybe that's the way I take it. Not a ton of interest on the Oakland. Not really much interest at all on the Oakland side, honestly. Ready to move into one of my favorite games of the slate. We have New England hosting Kansas City. The Patriots are 3-point favorites with the highest total of the game or highest total of the slate at 48.5. How are you looking to attack the Kansas City side, Bobby? Given that they face a great defense.
I'm actually pretty bullish on the Chiefs defense at 2,200. I think they're pretty interesting. Also, like just the way the Kansas City offensive weapons have been priced, they're kind of priced down because they didn't have to throw much last week. And I'm not saying like Tyreek Hill's priced down. It's more like Watkins, Hardman, Demarcus Robinson, those guys. So if I'm like playing tournaments, I want to game stack this game. Like I'm going to those price tags, and I'm building stacks that include these secondary receivers for KC. Like the price tag on Mahomes, like he's obviously going to have to throw more versus this Patriots defense, which is pretty much like a pass funnel. People might not expect this game. People might just not target them the KC side as much. But I'm pretty bullish on KC. Kelsey 6,200, another good play. And on the New England side, you can always run it back with Edelman. James White's seen an uptick in usage. John, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think James White is going to see quite a bit of ownership, on the primetime game. Of course, me and Bob, we were saying all season long, like, James White is going to have a spike week. Like, he's going to have a big game. He's going to have a big game. And then it happens when he's on the showdown slate, and I still played him, but, like, I barely played anything. So it was, like, a total waste. So I'm kind of bummed about that. But he is still cheap. I think people will go back there. It's still a good play. Kyle mentioned one of the higher totals. I think Jacoby Myers is worth mentioning. He's only 3,500, 16 targets over the last 2 games. Even with Sanu back last week, he saw 9 targets. So if the Chiefs are going to key on Edelman, I think Jacoby Myers could be a sneaky tournament play.
Yeah, like the Myers call, I think that obviously they're having issue at wide receiver, and he seems like he's kind of stepping up for, like, in terms of fantasy purposes, he's doing well. Brady seems like he's absolutely livid with him, but at 3,500, I think that's a pretty good price tag on Myers. It's interesting on the James, they do this every year with James White. Like they pretty much like hold him off and like kind of rein him in a little, and then they let him go as like the season as the games kind of get important. I think that kind of happened last week. So at 5,500, he might be too cheap. Um, Kyle, any final thoughts?
Well, I guess we should talk about we're not expecting to see Daryl Williams. There's no chance he really plays. Damian Williams, I would say unlikely to play. Didn't practice Wednesday. Usually that's a pretty negative sign. And I mean, I guess the New England Patriots have been very good against opposing running backs. But Bill Belichick even said when they played Dallas that they didn't care to stop Zeke. Like their plan was to take away Dak. I think the reason they've been so good against running backs is because they have just shut down opposing offenses. Running backs are so dependent on the offense that they play on that because the offense has been shut down, they haven't played well. I don't expect them to shut down the Kansas City offense, so I think LaShawn McCoy is a pretty solid play. And Bobby, you talked about the Kansas City defense. They have actually been most correlated with LaShawn McCoy, so I think that'd be an interesting stack. Especially, I don't think we'll see a ton of ownership on McCoy because people think defense matters.
I think KC defense is like a really good play this week. I this 2,200. Like they could get it done in cash. You need to get up.
All right.
Maybe that's just
KC defense and cash. John, the breadwinner of our company, would you like to bring us home?
Yeah, guys. I think we're still running a discount. Right, Bob? What is it? $20 for the rest of the season?
$20 for the rest of the season. Ownership, you have collected all the good stuff.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, you can't beat that. $20, you get to talk to me, Bob, and Kyle all day in the Discord. Ask Bob all your season-long questions. Make sure you at him in the chat.
He's a big IDP guy, loves good defensive player.
Yeah, no, just kidding. But seriously, go ahead and check out.
I'm getting like really irritated at the fact that I haven't been. I just can't get active in the chat. I'm busy doing. I got to grind NBA and NFL. Just can't.
We're working on it. We're working on it. $20. You can talk to me and Kyle all day long, and maybe get some interaction from Bob.
Core. That's not Justin's core. That's my core. Justin's just a Mel Foreman.
Oh, I know that. Oh, I know that. Yeah. But seriously, check out thefantasybros.com.
Wait a minute. That could go really bad for me down the line. He's not a Mel for me. That kind of showed him how to do a couple things. So.
All right, we're off the rails. We'll see you guys